below the start position of 9th, which was to be occupied by the unfortunate Pedro de la Rosa of Spain in his Arrows. After a quite magnificent qualifying lap yesterday, there's been a change. Some people have benefited and some have done just the reverse. For instance, Eddie Irvine, who had qualified 10th, is now starting 9th, as a result of which he moves to the left-hand side of the grid, which is the clean side of the grid, or the cleaner side of the grid. On the other hand, the unfortunate Jenson Button, who had qualified 11th, now starts 10th, but he's had to switch over to the dirty side of the track, and so on. Johnny Herbert suffers because he qualified 15th and is now starting 14th on the dirty side of the track. And the unfortunate Pedro de la Rosa is suffering most of all because he's not only moved down from 9th, the clean side of the track, to 22nd, the dirty side of the track. Incidentally, he was 6th fastest this morning in the warm-up, and that is a very considerable achievement. Michael Schumacher was quickest again this morning in the half-hour warm-up. There's David Coulthard, who was 4th fastest. As a matter of fact, in the warm-up this morning, the positions, Schumacher, Häkkinen, Barrichello, Coulthard, were exactly the same as they were in qualifying. But Jenson Button, who, as I said earlier on, qualified 11th, was 5th fastest this morning. The Williams BMW is going extremely well because his teammate Ralf Schumacher qualified 5th on the grid. So the question now is what is going to happen at the start, because as you've heard, passing on this circuit, this 2.9-mile circuit, is a 65-lap race, is very difficult indeed. It is on most tracks. It's particularly difficult here because the performance of the cars is so close, irrespective of which constructor has made them, and they're all top men, of course. But Michael Schumacher is starting in pole position for the first time this year, for the first time since the Japanese Grand Prix last year, which followed his magnificent pole position in Malaysia when he returned last year after breaking his leg in the British Grand Prix. So he's on a real high here. He's matched Mika Häkkinen's 24 pole positions now. Mika Häkkinen is starting behind him. He was 0.3 of a second slower this morning. So Ferrari are certainly looking good because Rubens Barrichello has beaten his man, if you regard his man as David Coulthard. So it's Ferrari, McLaren on the grid, followed by Ralf Schumacher's Williams and Jacques Villeneuve, 6th. Now watch Jacques Villeneuve. He's starting from the right-hand side of the track, the left-hand side as you will be looking at it. He's a super fast starter. He's got an improved Honda engine in the BAR, and he's going to be going for it.
Yes, Jacques is pretty handy off the line, and maybe that is something to do with the fact that he's sitting in the car and totally, utterly focused. But he's got a lot of work to do today. I think everybody's got a lot of work to do, Murray. I believe Michael Schumacher has got about 0.2 of a second per lap in hand over everybody else. If you look at the general trend through testing last week, free practice, qualifying, the warm-up this morning, Michael has got the edge around here. First time for a long time. And but having said that, the last time a Formula One car driver won from the pole was at the Hungarian Grand Prix last year. So the facts are certainly against Michael in that respect, but everything else is very much for him. This is a very physical track. He's super fit, as we know. And Michael really, I think, has got a great chance of winning this race this afternoon.
There we are. We're with David Coulthard now. Mika Häkkinen in front of him. Rubens Barrichello to the left. That's Spaniard Marc Genet in the Minardi.
Yes, there was quite a... And Michael Schumacher was slow away, but I think he has... Yes, he has. He's now rejoined. So I thought Schumacher was temporarily stuck on the grid there, Murray, but he did get away eventually.
Yeah, and you are now, of course, for those of you who are remembering the British Grand Prix some years ago, when he passed several people after the start of the parade lap and was penalised, you are now allowed to regain your position on the formation lap, which is what they're on now, exiting turn 2. Now then there's this long, you remember you've been round with Martin, a tremendously stirring exposition that was too. Around the long turn 3, this is turn 4. which leads down to the slowest part of the course, turn 5. It's about a 55-mile-an-hour corner on the apex. And now they start to climb. There's not a lot of gradient here at Barcelona, but I can tell you that when you try to walk round it, you notice that it's a lot steeper than you would have thought.
Yes, there are very few overtaking places because one fast corner tends to lead to another. I have seen a car overtaken into turn 5, for example. Unfortunately, it was me, I think, at the time, on a wet day in a race many years ago. But really, it's virtually impossible anywhere else, except if you get a good tow down the pit straight, you can have a stab. There's very good braking on either side of the track going into the first corner. The problem is staying close to the car in front through those last 2 very high-speed corners, where you see Michael weaving around now, generating some heat in the tyres. I've said before, I think it generates very, very little heat, but there you go. Now, one thing I did learn this morning is that after the drivers' parade, a lot of the drivers noticed that it's very, very windy up on the top of the circuit. You don't notice it so much in the paddock or down here in the pit straight, but the wind crossing the circuit has a big effect here at Barcelona, and it really upsets the aerodynamics just when the drivers need it most in these high-speed corners, and that will play a factor through the race as their cars are moving around.
We're with Rubens Barrichello now, and he watches Häkkinen peel off to the right, and he closes up on his position on the grid behind Michael Schumacher. So when you come to look at the grid head on, as you're almost doing now, pole position, Michael Schumacher will be on your right. I remind you to watch Jacques Villeneuve. He will be on the left-hand side, 3 rows back. The 2 Spaniards, sadly, are at the back because that's Marc Genet, who's starting 20th in the Minardi, and Pedro de la Rosa, very discouraged, obviously, closes up at the back.
Yes, the front men have been sitting now over 30 seconds, Murray. 32, 33 seconds before the lights.
It's ready, and it is action! Nice one, Michael Schumacher, who cuts across the track and tries to head off and does so. Mika Häkkinen, who continues to attack as they go up into turn 1. David Coulthard, then look at Ralf Schumacher. Ralf Schumacher is up into 2nd position. Amazing. Or has he got past Häkkinen? No, he's not. But he's got past David Coulthard. So David Coulthard, who started 4th, has been passed by Ralf Schumacher in the Williams BMW. A magnificent start.
And they both passed Barrichello, Murray. So the main man off the start was very clearly Ralf Schumacher. Hooked it up well, found a nice clear route through and slotted into 3rd, and so nearly 2nd, as you saw, going into that first corner. But a dream start for Michael.
Yep, 7 years between the Schumacher brothers. Just imagine what Ralph's going to be like when he's got yet more experience under his belt, and already Pedro Diniz in the Sauber is out of the race into the gravel track. Hopefully there's not who defines the strategy. There's another one out. It is the Prost of Jean Alesi, the great French driver. Oh, and out goes another one. That is the Arrows of De La Rosa. Well, what a dreadful Spanish Grand Prix it has been for him, because he also went off this morning in the warm-up, and this will be a meeting he will want to forget. So 3 retirements: Diniz out, Alesi out, De La Rosa out. Michael Schumacher, fastest of all, of course, and he's increased his lead over Mika Häkkinen to 1.6 seconds as he goes into turn. Here, replay.
Yes, here's the start. They're all quite clean away. Jenson Button, I see, moving well through the middle of the pack there. That's how he jumped up to 9th place. Here's another view from the back of the field. And look, the ones spinning their wheels just don't get away quite as well. If you can hook up and get rid of all the wheel spin, these things take off in the most amazing way. But Michael away. Mika doing quite well too, I can see, right at the front end. Ralph getting squeezed out at the last moment. Coulthard, a net loser, but maintains his 4th place because of Barrichello's very poor start. There it is. That's how, look, that's how Häkkinen stayed in front of Ralf Schumacher to maintain that 2nd position. 2 Jordans then. Which one of those is ahead? Frentzen has passed Truly. Frentzen ahead and leading the 2 Jordans. They're currently 7th and 8th. Johnny Herbert is back in 15th. Eddie Irvine in the sister Jaguar, a couple of places ahead of him in 13th.
Brilliant bit of track exploitation by Ralf Schumacher at the start there, and he continues to hold his 3rd position as BMW, sandwiching Mika Häkkinen, the world champion.
Yes, but the last 2 laps now, Mika Häkkinen has started edging back towards Michael Schumacher. He pegged the gap, now he's just creeping back at him. So let's be interesting. There's a 10th now. Michael's pulled a 10th back out on that lap. So it's pretty much even Stevens between the top 2. And then really 3/4 of a second per lap behind are Ralf Schumacher, Coulthard and Barrichello.
And let's just remember the World Championship situation as we watch Rubens Barrichello in that 5th position chasing David Coulthard. Michael Schumacher is 20 points ahead of David Coulthard, the British Grand Prix winner. He's 22 points ahead of Mika Häkkinen, who's won the championship for the last 2 years. And in the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari have got a massive 17-point lead over McLaren, with the Williams team in an excellent 3rd position, which they certainly couldn't have expected with their new BMW engine when this season began. They're ahead of Jordan, who took 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship last year, and are sharing 4th with Benetton at the moment. So, lap 10 out of 65. Weather conditions continue to be excellent. The track temperature is creeping up. It started the race round about 23 degrees. It's gone up about 4 or 5 degrees since then. Mika Häkkinen's 133rd. Into the pits comes Johnny Herbert from 14th position in the Jaguar, 2 places behind his teammate Eddie Irvine.
Little sip of milk for the Pussycat, the new set of tyres. Johnny Herbert really, again, not having a sparkling weekend. They had a job getting the fuel filler out, you saw there. Johnny away in a cloud of smoke. You know now that his pit limiter is on. His red rain light is flashing away at the rear, so that everybody knows when the drivers are using their pit speed limiter, so they don't use them on the track as traction control. And Johnny feeds back in and is about to be lapped.
And is lapped, but gets out to the track ahead of the McLaren of Mika Häkkinen. So is Johnny Herbert going to be passed by Mika Häkkinen cleanly and quickly? Will he move over and let Häkkinen through, in which case it won't delay the fin? If he does, Mika Häkkinen is going to have a greater gap between him and Michael Schumacher. They're on lap 21, so we're just about at 1/3 distance at the present moment. Nobody in the top 10 has yet stopped for fuel and tyres. The highest man to have stopped is Johnny Herbert, who we've just seen in 13th position come in. He's lost that place, of course. Jenson Button has been in and is now in 14th place. And Michael Schumacher has increased the gap between himself and Mika Häkkinen, and it will be increasing yet further because he's ahead of Herbert. Dives into the dust cloud. Somebody's gone off. I think somebody's just put a wheel off the circuit into the dusty bit between the track and the grass. It's very hot and dry here.
Well, Mika Häkkinen, although he's got to clear Johnny Herbert yet, who's now on fresh tyres, of course, because he did not see that the nozzle was clear of Schumacher's car. Schumacher, in a trigger reaction to that lollipop going up, has gone. He'll wonder what on earth it was doing, flapping around in front of him as he pulled away. I can't really say that I blame Michael for getting away, but then he didn't hesitate, he just went. And I have to say the lollipop man has been a bit overkeen. Of course, we know how intense these pit stops are, Murray. We know races have been won and lost now for some time, and it's all getting a little over-anxious.
Well, you can see how close it is now, because Schumacher and Häkkinen have both had their stop. We're on lap 27. Häkkinen is being held up momentarily by the Minardi, who moves over and lets him through, and there's a changed steering wheel for Jos Verstappen in the Arrows, because all the electrical contacts which govern the hydraulics and so many other things are on that steering wheel, and Louise Goodman is with Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, that's right. Whilst it's all been happening in the pit lane, Jacques has gone out of the race. Jacques, what was the problem?
I don't know, the throttle stopped working, and right away the car caught fire at the same time, so maybe a hydraulic leak, I don't know.
Thanks.
Well, a very resigned sounding Jacques Villeneuve. I said yesterday, I'll say again today, that the rumours are increasing as Nigel Stepney is removed on the stretcher from the circuit for medical attention in the superb medical centre here. But now Schumacher is 1.7 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen. Ralf Schumacher is still in third position, having stopped. Rubens Barrichello is up into fourth place, ahead of David Coulthard. So David Coulthard, they've all stopped now at least once. And David Coulthard...
Actually, we're hearing it's Barrichello. Barrichello, they're getting held up slightly in the coming into the pits there. So Ferrari have reacted to Coulthard's pit stop in the McLaren, and so look, is that Ralf Schumacher who's in the pits?
I just saw the Williams very quickly, but that's a very bad pit stop for Barrichello, and I'm pretty sure it's going to cost him his position, and that David Coulthard will regain fourth position.
No, I don't think he will. Coulthard's gone past. Actually, yeah, there's Coulthard. How will they come out? Look, it's absolutely touch and go. Gone, David, down the outside, and Ralf is going to have to defend the inside, and does so brilliantly. Ralf Schumacher, very aware of this, but he didn't make it. Coulthard went around the outside. That was a brilliant awareness by Ralf Schumacher, but he couldn't just make the difference, and that has popped Coulthard up into third place.
So David Coulthard gains not one but two places. He goes from fifth to fourth to third as quickly as you can say it. Rubens Barrichello is down in fifth position with the Williams BMW in front of him.
Well, the Ferrari and Williams pit stop was a direct reaction as Michael Schumacher comes in for his second run. James?
They're both in, guys. Oh, your heart has to go out to Andrea Vaccari, the new stand-in fuel man. If he makes a mistake of this, he'll lose a race, and he has
not in. He's made a mistake.
The hose is not properly yet. Häkkinen goes, he leads the motor race, and Vaccari's blown it for Ferrari. What a tragedy for him.
What cruel luck for Ferrari and for the new refueler. He will be in an agony over that. You can't really blame him. This is the first time he's done it under the colossal stress of race conditions. But there goes Mika Häkkinen rejoining the track, followed by Eddie Irvine, followed by Johnny Herbert. We wait for the Ferrari to rejoin, and look at the gap as coming up behind them are Barrichello and Coulthard and Ralf Schumacher. So it's cost Ferrari and Michael Schumacher dear, and Mika Häkkinen is leading and looking very good to win the Spanish Grand Prix and his first victory of the year 2000. Here he is.
Well, James, you said something I thought was absolutely correct. They will have practiced with a reserve. Jenson Button in for a stop. Looks a reasonably long one, 9.2. Not too bad, but probably a second and a half longer than it should have been. But you said, James, I'm sure they've practiced with a spare refueler. But if they have, he certainly wasn't ready for the job when it mattered most.
And Mika Häkkinen comes up behind the Benetton, and it's Alex
season, especially now Coulthard is up into third, and now you're going to see what James was taking you through. He hasn't got it on. He's been in the pits a long time. The wheels are already finished, look. Tyre change already finished before the refueling even started. And that's why Michael Schumacher's gone from 6/10 ahead in this motor race to 10.2 seconds behind.
Well, the new refueler took a tentative dip at the fuel hose, pulled it out, pushed it back again, and that has cost Michael Schumacher the lead.
You touched on the refuelers having to be big guys, Murray, because when that hose is full of fuel and with all the gubbins on the end of it and the valves, I think it weighs several tens of kilos to lump. It's quite a clumsy thing to lump around, and then of course you've got to get it on square.
Yeah, you need a man actually to position it in the fuel outlet and someone else behind you to carry the weight of the hose. One man cannot do it. Now the gap is 10.2 seconds. David Coulthard is closing up on Michael Schumacher. He's under 6 seconds behind. Now here are the positions. Häkkinen on lap 44 leads. Schumacher by now 11 seconds. David Coulthard is less than 5 seconds behind the Ferrari in third place. Ralf Schumacher is fourth. Fifth is Barrichello. Sixth is Salo.
His brother out of the way to let his teammate through. What a terrible position to find yourself in. But Michael did it. He stuffed his brother to help his teammate.
Well, is this tyres, Martin? Because there goes Michael Schumacher again from fifth position. Well, on goes a new set of boots. He's going to be lucky to finish in the points at the present moment. Well, Jenson Button is back in sixth position. So a very happy race for Williams, because now both their cars are in the top six, although Ralf Schumacher is down from third, which he held for so long, to fourth as a result of that fantastic battle we've just seen between himself, Barrichello and Michael Schumacher, which was resolved in the favour of Rubens Barrichello, who's shot up to third position in the Ferrari. Now, his lap times are slower than those of both Häkkinen and Coulthard, and the gap...
Sorry, Murray, just watch this. Look, Michael just made Ralph work for it. Then he wouldn't yield, even though he knew he was coming in the pits, and still kept going up the inside. I think they just about touch in the middle of the corner. Look, and that lets Rubens through on the inside. They say blood is thicker than water, but that's certainly not been the case through those three corners, as Michael gives as hard a time as he can to that Williams of Ralf Schumacher. Look, now he's going to hold him out. He comes into turn 10, and turn 11, rather. He pushes him out, holds him out, look, and lets, I can only assume that was entirely intentional, and lets the other Ferrari through on the inside.
And hats off, incidentally, to our television producer, because he has to decide what pictures you're going to see, and he certainly chose the right ones there, with who finished second, about 1.5 seconds behind David Coulthard. I think Häkkinen is pacing himself to victory.
Absolutely, without doubt. There's no way David, on matching pace for pace, could pull that kind of gap back, and they'll both be nursing their cars and changing 300-400 revs earlier, not braking too late, just keeping it all smooth. And Mika now lapping some 2.8 seconds slower than his fastest lap of the race, set earlier on at a 1:24.4. Just to recap on the race, Michael Schumacher got away beautifully from pole position. Häkkinen starting well, Ralf Schumacher having a blinding start, Barrichello falling back to 5th. Then, as they went through, the key moment of the race was Michael Schumacher's pit stop, where the refueling rig did not come out, although they lifted the lollipop and sent him on his way, causing some damage, causing a lot of uncertainty. That then wrecked his second pit stop and put Mika Häkkinen with this clear lead. Michael Schumacher appears then, had a slow puncture. Coulthard had a good run at him. McLaren doing a good job to get Coulthard back out ahead of Ralf Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello to give him track position. They then were able to maximise on that by passing Michael when he had that slow puncture. So 1 and 2 is how they've ended up, with now just 3 laps left to run.
And let us remember Tim self-focus, concentrate on the racing, forget the dreadful happening at Lyon Airport, put that behind him and ignore the press pushing and shoving to get at him and demand stories from him at a time when he was under enormous mental pressure. My heart goes out to him, and particularly, of course, to the families of the 2 pilots who perished in that tragic crash. So we're on lap 63 now. There is Ron Dennis with Pat Fry on the right, sitting calmly and confidently, just waiting for those last couple of laps to unfold. We're on lap 63 now. Mika Häkkinen is about to start the 64th and penultimate lap of the Spanish Grand Prix of 2000.
Jenson Button has stopped. We think it's an engine problem. Haven't seen it on the screen. I'm hearing from James down in the pits. He's seen or heard something. I'm expecting you'll see it anytime soon. What a shame. Button dropping out of that point scoring. There it goes, coming out of turn 9. And,
engine.
That's for sure.
And that means to say that Jordan look as though they are going to get a World Championship point after all. Heinz-Harald Frentzen moves up into 6th position for 1 World Championship point. And Mika Häkkinen driving onwards now. 7th is Salo, 8th is Zonta, 9th is Fisichella. Completing the top 10 is Alexander Wurz. Both the Benettons in the top 10. And Mika Häkkinen just about 3 miles, perhaps 3.5 miles away from his first victory of 2000. Look at the Finnish flags flying there. There is a very big contingent of Finns here. They follow their man with enormous enthusiasm, and they're going to get their reward here in Spain, because in just a minute and a half or so's time, the man you are looking at, Mika Häkkinen, is going to finish the race, but that you have, in his case, won it. The Spanish Grand Prix. Out of the right-hander comes Mika Häkkinen. You can see the crowd moving in the background, the Finnish flags waving there. Into and out of the last corner now comes Mika Häkkinen crossing the line, and it is victory for Häkkinen, McLaren and Mercedes in Spain. And the mass of blue and white flags, it's a very happy, a very relieved Mika Häkkinen. David Coulthard, I'm just looking to see whether, yes, David Coulthard goes through in second position. There he is. So, for the second race in succession, the McLaren team have scored 16 World Championship points in the Constructors' contest as Rubens Barrichello finishes in third position. Now, is it going to be Ralf Schumacher in the Williams BMW in fourth place in just a few seconds' time? Yes, over the line he goes. And Heinz Harald Frentzen is 35 seconds down the line. Only 6 people will have completed the full race distance.
Great day for McLaren. Many people here expected the Ferrari to have the edge and possibly even scamper off into the distance today. But it didn't happen, and it tightens the championship up very nicely for us, the fans. And certainly any ideas that this would all be over by July or August this year with a whitewash by Michael Schumacher is firmly out of the window now. I think, Murray, we're in for quite a tight championship.
Indeed
yet
we
again.
are. Indeed we are. And you saw an overjoyed Mario Ilian there who'd had engine problems in the Australian and Brazilian Grand Prix to put right. Ferrari won those 2 races very convincingly. But now in the Drivers' Championship, Mika Häkkinen is up into second place ahead of David Coulthard and 14 points behind Michael Schumacher and 2 points ahead of David Coulthard. Rubens Barrichello, who started this race equal fourth in the championship, is now just 1 point in fourth place ahead of Ralf Schumacher, and Fisichella well down in sixth position. Now McLaren are only 7 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. The World Championship of 2000, which at one time looked as though it was going to be a Michael Schumacher and Ferrari benefit, is proving, thanks to a couple of brilliant races from McLaren and Mercedes, to be quite the opposite.
I'd love to be in the room when the 2 Schumacher brothers get together. They do tend to get together just after the race and going and have a drink at a certain place in the paddock. And that's going to be a very interesting conversation, because if Michael didn't intend to wrestle his brother out like that, and I think he probably did, then he certainly made a bad error and cost his brother a place. So they're going to have an interesting conversation one way or the other.
Thumbs up from Mika Häkkinen all the way round the track. He's obviously absolutely overjoyed inside the cockpit there, and with every good reason. Touring home, the flags flying. Well, I said before that sometimes the Spanish Grand Prix, and particularly last year, has been processional, anything but this year. That was the Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello situation was certainly one of the most exciting passing manoeuvres I have seen for a very, very long time. Here's Rubens getting out of the cockpit, and confirmation about the Constructors' Championship, with Ferrari just being 7 points ahead of McLaren Mercedes. And Williams BMW holding their third position ahead of Jordan.
But Coulthard struggling to get out. The last time I saw him before the race, he had a frozen bag on his ribs and was laying down, and he looked like he could barely walk out of the motorhome, let alone get in a Formula 1 car.
He looked a bit tense and stiff there, Martin, as he eased himself out of the cockpit. In comes Mika. Now, when he gets up onto that podium, are we going to see him replicate the Michael Schumacher jump? I don't think so. Both David Coulthard and Mika Häkkinen are pretty conservative chaps on the podium, and they're both up there again for the second race in succession. Only one Ferrari driver, but once again Williams BMW have got one of their cars. It looked as though it was going to be both of them in the points. So
the pole sitter has still yet to win a race since the last Hungarian Grand Prix in August of 1999.
Absolutely so. Congratulations to myself. I'm delighted, says Mika Häkkinen, as Ron Dennis and Jürgen Hummert from Mercedes-Benz congratulate him. Love to know what Ron's saying to him.
Ron will be filling Mika in on certain events that Mika may not be aware of earlier on in the race. And Ron likes to keep the corporate stuff under control, and I think that's the right thing to do. Mika's going to go up onto the podium. The next thing is he's in the press conference and then the unilateral TV. So any little bit of information he can gather between getting out of his crash helmet and facing the world's press is very, very useful.
That's Norbert Haug, who is the Mercedes-Benz competition boss, who is quite rightly congratulating him. Now they go into the scrutineering area to be weighed, something that we've seen many times in the past. It is a formality. There won't be any problem with Mika Häkkinen's weight, and there won't be any problem about his combined weight with the car being under the permitted lowest level.
There's always so many Finnish flags in the crowd. I don't know whether anybody lives in Finland anymore. They seem to be scattered around all the places we go to for Grand Prix.
I think a lot of the fans actually buy flags irrespective of their nationality, of the nationality of their hero. I remember at Imola, I went up to 3 Union Jack wrapped chaps after Nigel Mansell had won a race and said, that wasn't bad, was it? And they said, okay, they were all Italians.
Very good. Barrichello, you saw making his way in. That's his second podium for Ferrari in 5 races, so not too bad a start from him. But as we said earlier in the race, you've really got to wonder where Rubens' ultimate pace is going to come from. He's not going to match Michael Schumacher. He's got to step up a gear somehow. Yeah,
there were a lot of people. I mean, he was making a lot, understandably, out of the fact that there weren't any orders written into his contract, as there were with Eddie Irvine last year, and that if he could get ahead and stay ahead of Michael Schumacher, he would be allowed to. Well, that really hasn't applied this year. Now, here we are. It's podium time.
Eddie Irvine did his fastest lap of the race as he went over the start-finish line to complete the race, which always upsets the bosses because they think you weren't trying hard enough earlier on. So it's very unusual to see that. We've got a green sector up here on our computers showing us that Irvine, who was down in 11th place, Herbert in 13th place, Button out of the race, of course, with the engine problem, but Eddie Irvine doing his best lap right at the end.
So while we wait for them to come onto the podium, and I'll interrupt myself when they do, victory for Häkkinen, 2nd Coulthard, 3rd Barrichello, 4th Ralf Schumacher, 5th Michael Schumacher, 6th Heinz-Harald Frentzen, 7th Mika Salo, 8th Ricardo Zonta, 9th Fisichella, 10th Wurz, 11th Eddie Irvine, 12th Trulli, 13th Herbert, 14th Genet, 15th Mazzacane, 16th Heidfeld. That's Adrian Newey in the cap, the man who designed the victorious McLaren Mercedes. And obviously very happy indeed with Didier Cotton in the background, who is Mika Häkkinen's manager. On to the podium, Rubens Barrichello. Top step, Mika Häkkinen. 2nd step, David Coulthard. 3rd step, Rubens Barrichello. The winning trio in Spain. The Finnish national anthem. Well done, Mika. Well done, Rubens. And there is Heidi, who is David's fiance. Very happy woman. very special mention for the courage of David Coulthard. He drove a magnificent race to finish second to his teammate Pekka Häkkinen, who now receives the winner's trophy. It's from the President of Catalonia, in which of course Barcelona is situated, and this excellent circuit where they do so much testing, a replica of a modern Formula One steering wheel. And David Coulthard gets a similar one soon, but the boss of the Olympics, Juan Samaranch, gives the Constructors' Trophy to Jürgen Huppert of Mercedes-Benz, as David receives his trophy, and then Rubens Barrichello. So, a convincing and magnificent win for McLaren and Mercedes-Benz, who have defeated the might of Ferrari here in Spain fairly and squarely. Michael Schumacher retains the lead in the World Championship, but by a dramatically reduced margin, as the champagne flows between Mika Häkkinen and Rubens Barrichello. Congratulations all round from Mika. David quietly steps away and keeps out of it, and you can understand why. So, there you go. It's great in Spain. McLaren, who've never been away, are right knocking on the door of Ferrari.